there is a land in between Israel and Egypt, which the ancient Greeks and Romans claim was Rhino Cura, a desert location on the border between ancient Egypt and the land of Israel. And they alleged that this place was run by Ethiopians and it tried to take over Egypt and Israel. This is one of the true indicators that we have in the past of someone saying that there are Ethiopians in Israel and Asia in general. And keep in mind, this area that's called Rhino Cura is the area that people claim that the Afro-Asiatic languages come from. Now, is it possible that the languages might have come from there, but the people in that location were Ethiopian? And if the people in that location are Ethiopian, why wouldn't the Egyptians be Ethiopian? Think about it. From the area from Egypt to Israel, it's Ethiopian. Below Egypt, it's Ethiopian. Around Egypt in Libya, it's Ethiopian. So why would Egypt be this one exception? The funny part is, all the other people also state that they're Ethiopian. Now, it writes that scientists have never discovered any proof that the people existed in that area, but we shall see in the future. Other claims are made that Ethiopian towns were found in Gaza. For example, we read, beyond this bay, abilities, the island Diodori and others lying desert also along the continent, there is much wilderness. The town Gaza, the promontory and port Moselite, onto which cinnamon is brought, thus far marched Cestrus with his army. Some writers place one town of Ethiopia beyond this, on the seaside, called Baradaza. Juba would have the Atlantic Sea to begin at the promontory Moselite, on which sea a man may sail with a northwest wind by coast of the kingdoms of Mauritania to Gades, and the whole of his opinion cannot be contradicted on this point. From a promontory of the Indians called Lepretka, and by others Drepanum. King Juba II of Mauritania was the son of King Juba I and Klein king of Numidia and Mauritania in 25 BC to AD 23. But this isn't the part of his life that we care about. At one point, he wrote a story about the ancient Egyptians and where they came from. And as you will see, Pliny the Elder basically scolded him for making information up. And he says that the Arabs are the first people who lived along the Nile and places like that. But Pliny the Elder corrects him and says actually it was Ethiopians, which he saw with his own eyes. And he also claims that Ethiopians were in Gaza, modern day Palestine today. But we'd have to read this. The chapter's name is The Gulf of the Red Sea, likewise of the Troglodyte and Ethiopian Sea. Now, keep in mind, the Ethiopian Sea is what we call the Indian Ocean today. It's that side, the part that starts in the Gulf, that starts with Egypt all the way down to about Kenya, those places. That's about as far as they went back in the day. Until you come to Ptolemaeus, but Agrippa 1322, without any distinction of the sides. Most geographers have set down the breadth to be 462 miles, and the mouth of it against the rising sun in winter. Some say is 7 miles broad, and others 12. The situation of it is this: beyond the bay called Atlanticus, there is another bay which the Arabians call Aint. On each standeth the town Heroon. There was also Kambaisu, between the Nili and Merchandé, into which the sick soldiers were conveyed. Merchandé, into with the 6 soldiers were conveyed, the nation of Tyre, the port Denon, from which Xerxes, king of Egypt, was the first that imagined to conduct a navigable channel into the Nile, in that part where it is runneth to the place called Delta, for the space of 62 miles, which is between the river and the Red Sea. This enterprise was followed by Darius, king of the Persians, and afterwards by Ptolemy, who also made a channel 100 feet in breadth and 30 deep, for 37 miles and a half in length, even to the bitter fountains. But this design went no farther, through fear of inundation, the Red Sea being found to lie 3 cubits above the land of Egypt. Some allege that this was not the true cause, but that if the sea were let into the Nile, the water thereof, of which only they drink, would be corrupted. Nevertheless, the way is well frequented from the Egyptian sea, and there are 3 ordinary ways there. One from Pelusium over the sand, where unless reeds be set up in the ground of direction, no path would be found, because the wind bloweth the sand over the tracks of the feet. 2 miles beyond the mountain Cassius, with after 60 miles returneth into the Palisiac way. Here the Arabians call Atu inhabit. The third beginneth at Gerium, which they call Adipisan, and passeth through these same Arabians, being 60 miles nearer, but full of craggy hills, and altogether destitute of water. All these ways lead to Asoni, with which was built upon the Gulf Charandra by Ptolemy Philadelphus, and bearing his sister's name. And he was the first that researched narrowly into the region Troglodytum, and the river that passeth by Asoni he called Ptolemus. Within a little of this place there is a small town named Anum, for which some write Philotera, which is the sister or the daughter, I forgot what they said. Beyond them are the Azari, wild Arabians from marriages of troglodytes. So these are a mixed population of Arab and troglodytes. The island Supreme and Sektala, and within a little desert unto Meris, Harmus, where is the fountain called Tadnis, the mountain Eos, the island Lambe, many harbors, and Bernice, a town bearing the name of the mother Philadelphus, to which there is a way lying from Coptus, as we have said, the Arabians called Atui and Nebede troglodytes, which the ancient called Miko, and others Mido. The mountain Pentadactylus, certain islands called Stene Dere, and others no fewer in number, named Halanasi. What are these names? Kadone Teposia, which gave the name of the precious stone. Oh, that's topaz. A bay full of islands, of which that wood is called Meroe, is well supplied with water. Another called Eritonus is altogether dry. There was governors there under the king within the land of the inhabited, the Kandake, whom they call whatever, because they are accustomed to feed on serpents. And in truth, there is no other region that breeds them more than this. Juba, who seemeth to have very diligently searched into these things, hath omitted in this tract, unless there be some fault in his original, to speak of a second Berenice, which is denominated Pancreas. Now, notice this is the first time that he brings up Juba and he contradicts him, as also of a third called Epidris, renowned for its situation, for it stands upon a neck of land running a long way, where the mouth of this Red Sea is not above 4 miles and a half from Arabia. There is the island Sitius itself producing topazes. Beyond this are woods where Ptolemy, surnamed Philadelphus, between built a city for hunting the elephants near the lake Monoliths, and named it Epitherus. This is the region mentioned by me in the second book, where for 45 days before midsummer, and as many after at 6 hours. Now that we've laid down the foundation, let's go to the part where they talk about the Ethiopians. The town Suke, the island Daphnis, and the town Adelotian built by Egyptian slaves who escaped from their master. This is the greatest town to traffic of the troglodyte as well as the Egyptian, and it is from Ptolemais 5 days sailing. Thither are brought very much ivory and horns of the rhinoceros, skins of hippopotamus, tortoise shells, monkeys, and slaves. Above are the Ethiopians, called Erotaurus, also the island named Elau, and islands named Bacchus, Antibacchus, and Strathanus. Beyond them, there is a gulf in the coast of Ethiopia, as yet known, a thing to be wondered at, considered that merchants search into remoter parts. Also, a promontory wherein is a fountain named Kukos, much desired by sailors. Beyond it is the port of Isis, distant from the town of Adulte, 10 days rowing the oars, and thither is myrrh collected by troglodytes. Before this harbor are two islands named Pseudoplay. So here we go. This is the part where Juba alleges that the Ethiopians are not the natives of Ethiopia or the East. So he says, also, he affirmed that the people inhabiting along the side of the Nile from Syene and Meroe are not Ethiopians, but Arabians, who, for the sake of fresh water, approached the Nile, and there dwelt, as also that the city of the sun, which we said before in the description of Egypt, standeth not far from Memphis, was founded by Arabians. There are some also who assign the further side of the Nile to Africa and not to Ethiopia. But leaving every man to his own pleasure, we will set down the towns on both sides in that order in which they are declared. And to begin with that side toward Arabia, after you are past Syene, is the nation of the Katadupi, and them the Sinite, the town Tecumseh, which some have called Thatis, and then he lists a bunch of towns, and then he comes down to this and says, thus hath Bion set them down, but King Juba hath arranged them otherwise. Megatokics as a town on the mountain between Egypt and Ethiopia, which the Arabians called Mersine. And then again, he lists a bunch of towns. On the side of Africa, they are reckoned in this way, another Tecumseh with the same name. After reading the town's names, he continues. There was formerly a town named Epis over against Meroe, but destroyed by Bion wrote. But before it was destroyed, Bion wrote, these were recorded until you come to Meroe, of which at this day scarcely anything is to be found on other side. The remainder is a wild wilderness, but report made to Prince Nero by the Praetorian soldier sent thither from him under the command of a tribune to make discoveries at the time when amongst his other wars he thought of an expedition against the Ethiopians. But in the days of Divus Augustus, the Roman arms penetrated thither under the conduct of Publius Petrinus, a knight of Rome and prefect of Egypt. He, Conus, a knight of Rome, the prefect of Egypt, he conquered all these towns in Ethiopia, which he found in this order, following, okay, then he names a bunch of towns where the river Nile casteth itself down with such a noise that the inhabitants living close by lose their hearing. He won also Napata. He marched forward a great way into the country, even 870 miles beyond Syene. But this Roman army laid not all waste in those parts. It was the Egyptian wars that wasted Ethiopia, sometimes by ruling and at others by servitude. It was illustrious and powerful until the reign of King Memnon, who ruled in the time of Trojan War, so that Syria was subjected to it. In the same manner, they disagree about the measure of Ethiopia, and first Dalian, passing far beyond Meroe, after him Aristotenes, Bion, and Belices, also Simodenes the Lesser, who dwelt in Meroe 5 years, when he wrote of Ethiopian Timothian, the admiral, and the fleet of Philadelphus, hath left in record that the Syene to Meroe is 60 days' journey without particularizing the measure. Now he mentions the Kandake, which is a queen of Africa, depicting that women ruled in this part of the region. Entry of the island 70 miles, and just by there was another island called Tatu, which formed a port for them that approached by the channel of the right. The buildings within the town were few. The isle was subject to the queen named Candace, a name that for many years already hath passed in succession from the queen to another. Within this town is the shrine of Hammon for devotion, and in all that tract many chapels. Finally, so long as the Ethiopians were powerful, this island was very famous, for by report they were accustomed to furnish of armed men 250,000 and maintain artisans 400,000. Also, it is at this day reported that there have been 45 kings of Ethiopia. But the nation in general was in old times called Ethria, afterwards Atlantia, and finally from Valcum's son Ethiops it took the name of Ethiopia. It is no wonder that about the remote borders of it there are produced both men and beasts of monstrous shapes. Before the time of Ptolemy Laertius, the king of Egypt knew no use of fire. Some writers have reported that in this country near the marshes from whence the Nile hath its source, the inhabitants a nation of pygmies, but where we left off there is a continual range of mountains all red as if they were burning. Beyond Meroe there is a country lying above the troglodyte and the Red Sea with 3 days journey from Napata towards the Red Sea. In most places, they save rainwater for their ordinary use. All the country between is very abundant in gold. All beyond this region is inhabited by the Atabale people of Ethiopia.